Alice touched a lilac and watched as it turned into a firefly and flew away. Bored with her game, she raised her brown arms and soared among the clouds. She swung among the birds, running her fingers down their long, muscular backs. Then she headed out into space and plunged her slender body into the white-hot plasma of the sun, where she bathed in a sense of wistful beatitude. She lost count of the years, but at last she realized that there was, on Magnamund, the march of evil. She snapped her strong fingers, and moments later was standing on a mound near Toran. Approaching her on a broken pony was a youth clad in a blue robe spotted with silver stars. She extended her right arm and played in the air with her fingers. From their tips fell small, buzzing insects. She threw back her head and laughed. As an afterthought, she caused an eclipse of the sun. It wasn't a very good eclipse, but then Alice wasn't a very good person. Vonatar ran furtively through the dark, cobwebbed corridors towards his own cubicle. Once again, that blundering old goat had humiliated him in public debate. Vonatar had tried for himself the right-hand path of magic, the magic of the dark wizards, the Nadziranim. As yet he knew only a little of it, a few spells gleaned from dusty books in the guild's library, but already he had increased his magical powers tenfold. If he were fully initiated into its mysteries, he would be fit to rule over the country, and indeed the world. Vonatar's cell was cold, dark, windowless, and Spartan. He crept into it and lit a foul-smelling torch clamped in a bracket on the wall. There was little he wished to take with him. He pulled 2 or 3 books from the shelves, books which he had long ago stolen from the guild's library. He dragged a sheet from his bed, laid it out on the floor, and threw the books into its center. A spare robe and some other items of clothing followed. Almost as an afterthought, he added the crystal star, which he'd been given some years before on the occasion of his achieving the status of brother. He pulled the corners of the sheet together and knotted them. Today was the day when he must leave the Brotherhood forever and journey to ally himself with Dark Lord Zagana, ruler of the Darklands. Zagana had access to the innermost secrets of Nadziranim magic. His breath came fitfully, partly because of the speed with which he was moving, partly because of his excitement over the audacity of his plan. He was barely conscious of a slight sound in the corridor outside his cell. Silent Wolf threw the axe accurately. It whirled through the air and lodged itself in the hard oak of another team's goal. Formal lessons having been cancelled for the day, the boys and girls of the monastery were playing Greel. It was a dangerous game and only half approved of by their Kai tutors. Swift reflexes and a great deal of foolhardiness were required, but injuries were surprisingly rare. Silent Wolf's moment of glory was short-lived. Stormhawk, who had been watching the game with a mixture of disapprobation and excitement, suddenly called his name. The youth looked irritatedly across the pitch at the elderly tutor. "Silent Wolf, come here, boy." Reluctantly, Silent Wolf obeyed the command. He shrugged at his teammates, who looked at him in dismay. His removal from the team most probably would result in its defeat. Stormhawk regarded the boy thoughtfully. The old man was dressed in his full fighting costume, a green helmet with a bright gold emblem of an oak tree on it, a robe of red velvet, a green cotton tunic hemmed with golden filigree, a sturdy jacket of overlapping scales of leather, and boots made from untreated hides. He was carrying his battle shield, and his sword was in his belt. Even though he was aged, he made an imposing sight, and one which would have struck terror into the soul of any foe. "Boy, when Kai and Ishir in their wisdom sent you here to the monastery, they cannot have known what a heavy burden they were putting on an old man's shoulders." But the old man was smiling. "The only skill you seem interested in acquiring is weapons skill. Well, never mind. The rest will come to you as you grow older and perhaps a little wiser. For now, I want you to put your weapons skill to good use and help me." Silent Wolf suddenly became interested. "Come with me and I shall explain," said Stormhawk, and he refused to speak further until the two of them were sitting in the old man's study. The room was littered with strange objects which Silent Wolf was unable to identify. Along the front of Stormhawk's desk lay a neat row of small skulls. Silent Wolf recognized a few of these, but most came from animals he had never seen. At one end of the row was a skull which he could swear was human. The old warrior saw Silent Wolf's half-sickened, half-fascinated stare at this and nodded. "My predecessor. In his will he left me nothing but his head, which he said would give me better advice than any living person, and you know, I think he was right." He tapped the skull with his knuckle. "An empty skull, my boy, yet sometimes I think it has more brains in it than you and me put together. Whenever I have a problem I cannot solve, I sit and look into its eyes, and sooner or later it tells me what the solution is. Mind you, I have to listen very carefully, because its voice is very quiet. Which brings me to the reason I've asked you to help me." "Yes, sir?" said Silent Wolf, leaning forward eagerly. "An hour ago I was asking my old friend here about a difficulty that faces me. We've heard reports that there are scouting parties of Gyaks intruding into Sommerlund. So far the reports come only from the farms on the flanks of the Derncrag Mountains, but unless we repel those creatures, they will become bolder and bolder in their forays." Silent Wolf felt slightly sick. In his classes he had been told much about the Gyaks, slaves bred by the Dark Lords. They were small and squat, and more vicious than any human could ever be. They had yellow fangs and eyes, and their skin was a putrescent grey. Stormhawk read the thoughts that were chasing each other across Silent Wolf's face. No, I'm not asking you to do battle with the Gyaks. You're a little too young for that yet. We must repel the Gyaks, but before we can send an army against them, we must establish where they are and how strong their forces are. For this, we need a scouting mission. You are lax in your studies, but you have some qualities that I admire. One of these is courage, boy, and another is your ability with weapons. Going on a mission of this kind may persuade you that there is more to the way of Kai than courage and brute strength. Who else will be on this mission?" "Oh, it'll be just you and me, of course." "Vanatar, what are you doing?" "Doing? Why should you ask?" The elder, whom Vanatar recognized as Lauren, came further into the room. "It seems curious to me that you should be putting books and clothes into a sheet, that's all. Never mind. I felt I should tell you that you were not alone in the complaint you made to the Guildmaster today. Others of us have felt the same, but haven't had the courage to voice our feelings." "So you agree with me, then? How many of you are there?" "Merely a handful." Lauren spread his bony hands. His body was frail and angular, his beard long yet wispy. One could almost see his heart and his lungs through the pale gauze of his ancient skin. "We are all old, but our magic has lost little of its strength." Vanatar looked at the sorry collection of possessions he had put together. Might he be better off biding his time? If he could unite the group of dissenting elders, why, with himself at their head, they could possibly overthrow the Guildmaster and then bring the Brotherhood together with Zargana. Vanatar and Zargana together would be a powerful force in the land, but if they had also the magical support of half a dozen of the most powerful magicians of all Sommerlund, they would surely be invincible. "Would you be prepared to join me?" His grey eyes, as he stared intently at Lauren's face, took on the hardness of tarnished steel. "Join you? What do you mean?" "Join me in overthrowing the Guildmaster so that we can adopt the magic of the Nadziranim." Lauren's whole body trembled. That is heresy. Do not be so foolish, Vanatar." "But I thought you said you agreed with me. Surely that's what you meant." Lauren controlled the shaking of his body. "I could never contemplate such a heresy. What I meant was that the next time you debate with the Guildmaster, we shall support you in calling for the Brotherhood to experiment with different forms of magic. There is doubtless some good to be found in the right-handed path. We are willing to sift through it to see what is good there. But even you must know that the fullness of Nadziranim magic can bring about only evil. And as for overthrowing the Guildmaster..." Vanatar slumped. It was useless. For a moment his hopes had been raised. Now it was a question of reverting to his original plan. "You tire me, Lauren," he said. "You are an old man of fading courage. Leave me alone." "As you wish it, Vanatar. But remember, you are not totally without allies among us elders. But let us have no more talk of deposing the Guildmaster. He is a finer person and a finer magician than you or I will ever be. It is right that he should remain our leader." He turned to leave, but as he did so his eye fell on Vanatar's hastily assembled bundle. Pardon my curiosity, but just what is in that sheet? Some things to be thrown away. Lauren looked suspicious. Vonotar, you would not lie to a fellow member of the guild, would you? Lie? Of course not. Do you think I'm a traitor to our true principles? Lauren shook his head automatically, but the lines around his jaw hardened and his eyes pursed. He stared at the bundle, and Vonotar knew that he was looking through the sheet to what lay within. Perhaps you're planning a journey. Where might you be going? And why would you lie about it? Oh, no. His skin had been pale before, but now it was the whiteness of ice. I understand it now, Vonotar. Oh, how could you be so stupid? You planned to travel to the Darklands and find allies there. You, who are supposed to be working against evil in this land, you could even contemplate this, Vonotar. You are a madman. Forget about... Vonotar thought a thought of a curious shape and extended the index finger of his right hand towards the elder. The air crackled, and a rim of green appeared all around Lauren's body. And now you would try to use magic to destroy me. Vonotar, I cannot let this go unnoticed. Even though your magic is powerless against my shields, you have shattered the cardinal principle of the Brotherhood. He turned once again towards the door. I have to report all this to the Guildmaster. I'm sorry, Vonotar. Wait a moment, Lauren. Lauren paused, but did not turn around. Perhaps you older men are right after all. Perhaps I've been letting my heart guide my head. It's too late for regrets. Anyway, how can I believe you? You cannot. He clapped his hands together and then held the palms up towards Lauren's retreating back. A barely visible shadow darted across the cell and struck Lauren between the shoulder blades. The elder's green shield withered instantly. His robe singed and then burst into unnatural flames. He screamed, the last sound he was ever to utter, before his heart exploded. Vonotar fell back on his bed, exhausted. The room and the corridor immediately outside it were covered in blood, and he was sickened by what he had done. He had never expected anything quite like this. It was not only the carnage that nauseated him, there was also the fact that he had deliberately violated the codes to which he had once promised to adhere. Perhaps he could have justified to himself using right-hand magic against one of the Dark Lord's hideous spawn, but against a good man and a brother magician, and Lauren, Vonotar reflected, had indeed been a good man. He sat up. There was no time now to think about whether he was right or wrong. It could only be a matter of minutes before another member of the Brotherhood came across the mess in the corridor and raised the alarm. Vonotar must be long gone by then. He picked up his bundle and, with a wink of his eye, removed the blood from his clothing. Picking his way fastidiously through the remains of the elder, he crept out into the corridor, looking left and right to see if anyone was approaching, but the corridor was empty and dark. He had to go to the stables, where he could commandeer a horse, and he half walked, half ran along the twisting corridors. The ostlers at the stables were at first unhelpful. Then they saw Vonotar's badges of rank and moved swiftly to usher forth the finest of the horses. It was a proud grey mare called Alia. She kicked and bucked as they put the reins on her, and not until she was fully harnessed did she calm down. Her eyes rolled nervously, but Vonotar sent her a mind spell to soothe her. With a little difficulty, he wasn't accustomed to riding, he hauled himself up and pointed her head towards the main gate of Toran. Once outside the city, he spurred Alia to a gallop. He kept her at this pace until he rounded a bend, and the city was lost to sight behind him. As soon as he was certain that no guard could spy him from the city walls, and that there were no other travelers visible on the road, he reined the mare in and dismounted. Now, my pretty one, it's time to make a few improvements to you. If you've ever dreamt of being the fastest horse in all Sommerlund, well, your dreams are about to come true. He gripped the coarse hair of her mane in his right hand and sang a short phrase from an ancient right-hand spell. He felt her strength swell beneath his hand. She whinnied nervously, and her forefeet trod the ground, impatient to be on her way. Vanatar snapped his fingers and the grey mare became instantly silent. "From now on, you will do everything I tell you to. That and no more. Understood?" The mare stood there, her subservience to his will clear from every line of her body. Her breathing calmed until Vanatar could hear the wind riffling the grass around him. He smiled. Suddenly, for the first time in all the long years since he had entered the Brotherhood, he felt as if he were free. Until a few minutes ago he had been shackled by the rules and regulations of the guild, but now he was his own man, able to do whatever he wished. He vaulted onto Alia's back and slapped her rump. She responded by taking a first pace forward, a pace that covered more than a mile of the road. She shied, unnerved by the sudden transition. But Vanatar smacked her hindquarters once again, and so she took another pace, and another, and another. Silent Wolf and Stormhawk crouched behind a huge rock that jutted from the bleak hillside. The light was a curious greasy green. Even the harsh yellow of the sun and the piercing blue of the sky could not affect this. In a shallow col beneath them there was an encampment of Giaks. The leader in charge of the band was fast asleep, snoring loudly. Some of the Giaks were likewise taking the opportunity to sleep, while others milled about, apparently bored. Silent Wolf could catch only a few snatches of what they were saying among themselves, and none of the words made any sense to him. Stormhawk beside him was listening intently, his lips moving soundlessly as he translated the words he could hear. "What's going on?" whispered Silent Wolf. "Hst!" The boy relapsed into silence once more. For the 1000th time, he fondled the haft of the axe tucked into his belt, and wondered what it would be like if he should have to use it. After a while, Silent Wolf grew bored with watching the Giaks. He turned his back to the rock and looked out across the foothills over the great plain of Sommerlund. By comparison with the dim light prevalent among the Derncrags, that from Sommerlund was brightly yellow. He could see the neat fields of the farmers laid out across the land like some multicolored checkerboard. Soon he fell asleep. When he awoke, it was dusk. Stormhawk was shaking him by the shoulder, holding a hand over his mouth in case he made any sound. "It is time to leave." The sun was nearly setting when they finally reached the cover of some straggly trees and could stand up to stretch their stiff muscles. "We must travel some distance tonight, boy. I'd like to put a good many miles between ourselves and the Giaks before we sleep." What were the Giaks talking about? "Better you don't... On second thoughts, if something should happen to me, just wait a little while." For over an hour they scrambled and tripped down the hillside in increasing darkness. Once they were on level ground again, they made swifter progress. "The Giaks, you wanted to know what I heard them saying?" "Yes." "As we knew, the Dark Lords are on the march once more. This time it's Zargana. What we hadn't realized is the size of the army he's amassing. He's already gathered 500,000 or more Giaks, Vordaks, Helghasts, and Doomwolves. They said that he has too over 100,000 Zlanbeast and Kran at his call, plus several thousand Drakarim. It's going to be an ugly business, this. Sommerlund isn't prepared for an invasion on this scale. The Kai are ready, but the Kai by themselves are not enough. The Giaks we were watching are only an advanced guard, and as far as I could gather from what they were saying, we could expect a full-scale invasion either this summer or perhaps the next. Raising an army in so short a time to repel the Dark Lords isn't going to be easy." The darkness was now so deep that it was almost impossible for them to make out the road ahead. Had it not been for Stormhawk's skill in tracking, they would have been hopelessly lost. When the wind told them that they were near a clump of trees, Stormhawk put his hand on Silent Wolf's shoulder and came to a halt. "That's enough for tonight. We'll sleep here and carry on in the morning." When Silent Wolf awoke, the brilliance of the sky made him roll over onto his stomach and shield his face with his hands. He had slept fitfully during the night, and his head was aching with fatigue. "I thought I'd let you sleep late, boy, but it's time now that we were on our way again." Silent Wolf looked up, squinting against the brightness of the sunlight, and saw the stocky figure of his tutor silhouetted by the backdrop of sky. Minutes later they were back on the road. Now they could see where they were going. They made good progress. As Silent Wolf had learned at the monastery, the best way of moving swiftly across level terrain was to run 100 yards, walk the next 100 yards, run the next, and so on. At noon, they made a halt by the side of a stream and drank copiously. The water was wonderfully cool. Silent Wolf was hungry, but he said nothing, and if Stormhawk could keep going without food, then so could he. "What's that over there, boy? Your eyes are better than mine. Oh, it's gone now." Silent Wolf nevertheless obediently trained his gaze on the road. Suddenly he saw a grey horse and its rider snap into existence. Then the horse and rider vanished as abruptly as they'd appeared. He blinked disbelievingly. "I think, sir—" "I don't care much what you think, boy." Stormhawk was now in a frenzy of motion as he gathered his weapons around him and leapt to his feet. "That's magic you're seeing, and you can call me a Giak if it's left-hand magic. Go and hide yourself in the long grass." Silent Wolf ran to conceal himself in the long reeds growing by the water's edge. His tutor stepped out into the middle of the road and waited, his mighty broadsword drawn. Twice more, Silent Wolf saw the rider and horse blink into and out of existence. The third time they appeared, they were only some 50 yards ahead of Stormhawk, and the man astride the horse reined in. "Who are you?" "A magician. I've been sent by the Brotherhood of the Crystal Star to investigate these parts." Stormhawk lowered his broadsword, but only a little. "How do I know you're telling the truth? Why should you think I'm telling you false?" "Because your way of traveling puts me in mind of something I saw a long time ago. A magician came among us. He sang a slow, sad song, and 7 of us were dead. More would have died had Spring Eagle not plunged a dagger into his chest. Old man, I have many miles to cover. On another day I would be fascinated by your recollections, but right now I must be on my way." Stormhawk ignored what had been said. "Later we learned why all that the man's magic had produced was evil. He was a servant of the Dark Lords, and his magic came from the right-hand path. Can you assure me that you too do not practice the arts of the Nadziranim?" "You're beginning to bore me, old man. Of course I cannot draw on the powers of darkness, as I told you. I'm a member of the Brotherhood of the Crystal Star. We are devoted to left-handed magic. We are your friends. Then why is it that I sense danger in the air?" The rider made no verbal response. Instead, he curled back his upper lip to show even rows of white teeth. He ran his right hand through his mane of black hair. "I asked you—" "You ask too much." Silent Wolf could see Stormhawk flinch. Earlier the skies had been clear, but now there was a tangle of dark clouds overhead. Silent Wolf shivered. Suddenly it had become icy cold. Yet Stormhawk still stood defiantly in the middle of the road, and now he had again raised his sword so that he was in an attacking position. A tiny whirlwind grew up on the dirt track between the two men. At first it was hardly noticeable, just a swirling of pebbles and dust, but it slowly grew larger and larger until it reared 100 feet into the air. The sound of the vortex was deafening. The clouds overhead now filled the sky, blotting out most of the sunlight. Stormhawk moved not a muscle as the whirlwind began to advance towards him. The wind caught at his tunic. Still he didn't move. A moment later it seized his body and lifted him off the ground, his arms and legs flailing. A single glance at his face told Silent Wolf that his tutor was a prisoner of terror, yet the old man glanced very briefly at him and quite deliberately allowed his broadsword to fall to the ground. "Take this back to the monastery, boy," said a voice in Silent Wolf's mind. And then Stormhawk was carried up and up into the sky until he was as high as the dark clouds and seemed as small as a gnat. His body whirled in giddy circles. Abruptly the horseman waved a hand and the clouds vanished. The wind died instantly. Silent Wolf watched as the figure of his tutor grew. The old man was spread-eagled as he fell, and then he was a sound of soft flesh meeting the hard ground. His body twitched once as if it hoped to defy reality, and then was still. Silent Wolf didn't dare move. He watched as the rider slapped the rump of his grey mare and vanished. He waited a few moments longer, unable to believe what he had just seen, and then crawled forwards to the road. He found that he was weeping. Ishir and Kai knew how often he had cursed Stormhawk for punishing him, but in the last couple of days they had become friends. Now the old man was a mess of broken flesh. The young man searched for signs of life. There were none. He picked up the broadsword, and with some difficulty attached it to his leather belt. There would be time for only the hastiest of burials. He realized that his finest testimony to Stormhawk would be to carry the news of the Dark Lord invasion back to the monastery. So he dragged the body into a field, dug a shallow hole, and heaped a small pile of stones on top. Stormhawk was gone, and he too must be on his way. The sun shone, the road was even and kind to the feet. Without even thinking about it, Silent Wolf found himself running the first 100 yards and then slowing to a walk.